The kids, now anecdotally, Christina believes that at least 2 of them have had it in the last few months. Why? Well, we don't know, but atypically long duration sinus fever lethargy. I think we're going to learn that coronavirus has been in this country since like October, that there have been cases. And as you guys both know, and I hear all the time from all over the country, how many people do you hear saying, I think I had it. I had this and this, I lost my sense of smell and this and that, but I never got tested. Those cases are like abounding all over the country. And I think that the frustration here is that we just don't know.
I stand up to say that I was sick in November. I met all of the criteria. I have a positive antibody test, and I am certainly not alone in my assertion that I was sick in November. There are many, many other people. And I asked on Twitter, I'm still waiting for a major US market-based media company to do an investigation, to do a study to, one, just how many people think they were sick, and then go back and find out how many people actually thought they were sick and have tested positive for the antibody. I think that will settle a lot of debate. I mean, there are people that think that I'm a conspiracy theorist. I am not. There are people that think I'm a crazy tinfoil hat wearing person. You can tell I'm not. I'm just somebody that believes what a lot of other people believe. The difference is this. I'm a mayor of a city in New Jersey that's been ravaged by coronavirus. I think that gives me some credibility to speak on this. And I think I have a voice. And there are a lot of people that have warned me. I've been issued warnings for my safety. I've been issued warnings that say, don't cross this administration or don't cross that government. I'm not here to talk about an administration. I'm not here to talk about a specific country. I'm here to say that I believe I was sick in November. I believe there's a lot of evidence that supports that. And I believe there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, that concur with me on that.
There is growing evidence that coronavirus emerged earlier than was initially suspected. Hill correspondent Reed Wilson writes that scientists now suspect a 55-year-old resident of China's Hubei province had the first case in mid-November.
Director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy noted that he wouldn't be surprised if it was in the United States in December. Joining us via Skype to expand on this is Reed Wilson. He's also the author of Epidemic: Ebola and the Global Scramble to Prevent the Next Killer Outbreak. In the winter, Reed joined us after speaking to medical professionals about coronavirus and how spot on were they with their predictions. He's here now himself. Reed, it's great to see you.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Absolutely. Reed, tell us a little bit about this expansion of the timeline. Also would like your thoughts on the growing speculation in the intelligence community and some dissent as well that the virus may have originated from a Wuhan laboratory. What are your sources and information telling you on that front and on the timeline itself?
So let's start with the lab. That's almost certainly not going to be the case. The intelligence community does not believe that this thing was man-made or created in some kind of laboratory. And the evidence that they have is basically this virus looks entirely new. And when laboratories do create viruses, which they do, I mean, that's basically what a lot of vaccines are, they use the structure of an existing virus. That's not what has happened in this case. This thing looks different from pretty much everything else we've seen, medically speaking. So I think it's highly unlikely that this thing came out of some kind of laboratory. I think it's far more likely that it's been spreading around the world far longer than we've even known. We first identified this thing in late December. December 31st, the World Health Organization started picking up reports of a cluster of atypical pneumonia cases in Wuhan. It now appears that this thing has been spreading for far longer than that. You mentioned the 55-year-old in Hubei province who probably had this thing in mid-November. There was recently a case in France. A hospital just north of Paris discovered that they treated a coronavirus patient who was 42 years old, who had not traveled anywhere, who was a fishmonger in nearby Paris. They treated him on December 27th. So that tells me that the coronavirus itself had already gotten to Europe by about mid-December and probably way back before that. One of the things that's really important for doctors to do, scientists to do, is to figure out where the index case was, that very first time where this virus leapt from an animal to a human, so that they can go back and figure out how that virus leapt over and therefore stop the next transmission if and when it happens.
Right. And so I'm sure you have a lot of friends. I have friends and family who are like, I think I had this back in November, back in December, or back in January before we even knew that it was in the U.S. I mean, how likely is that? What do you think is the earliest spread likely that we had here in the United States?
At least December, at the very least, and possibly earlier than that as well. I mean, this is totally anecdotal, but I got a friend who's a teacher who teaches a college class that included a student who came back from Wuhan over Thanksgiving, and then that teacher fell ill in December. She's recovered; she's totally fine. But there is a growing sense that we do not have a real sense of the scope of how many people this virus has infected. Some estimates suggest that we're underestimating the number of cases by 10 to 20 times, which would mean nearly 20 million people across the United States have probably already had this, the vast majority of whom, the good news is, have either had no symptoms or just the symptoms of a common cold. But the fact is that the serological tests, basically you test somebody's blood for antibodies, that's showing up a lot more. The antibodies are showing up a lot more than we've seen in previous years, in previous tests. So this virus has been around for a lot longer than we know. That means that the overall mortality rate is a lot lower than we initially suspected, but it also means that it's probably spread to communities that don't even know that it's in their midst right now.
So, Reed, what is the policy implication of that? I've seen people talk about that. I mean, there's a growing movement amongst people who want lockdowns to end. They say, hey, look, a lot of people had it. The infection mortality or fatality rate is way lower than we initially thought. What do you think the right policy implications, based on your expertise, might be of that serological testing?
Yeah, this is the real tragedy that I think we're about to go through. Is this virus started as an outbreak in big urban hubs. It started in Seattle, in New York, in the Bay Area, and then we locked down pretty much everything all across the country. Well, the case counts in those areas are in fact going down. That's great news. But the case counts in other areas that haven't been terribly affected are starting to go up. So we're starting to see places like rural Mississippi, rural Iowa, getting a lot more of these cases. And these are people who've been locked down for 7 weeks. They're probably pretty frustrated at having been locked down, not seeing evidence of the virus in their communities. And I mean, I think that's only legitimate human nature to be frustrated by the economic damage that comes along with the medical damage. What we risk here, though, is an outbreak that does require a lot of people to go to the hospital. And if they do, those health systems in rural America are nowhere near as strong as the health systems in New York or Boston or Atlanta or Seattle or places like that. I mean, that just logically makes sense. There are fewer health dollars in those areas, fewer less ability to actually treat a huge number of patients. So we risk a whole bunch of people opening up in states where the number of people who have these antibody protections are not as high as in places like New York and Boston. So we could see a second wave coming in rural America that is far less prepared to deal with it than the urban centers that have already had to deal with it.
Right.
And Reed, what is the latest that we know about whether or not you are actually immune if you have those antibodies, and for how long that immunity might last?
So the first part of the question, it looks like the testing is showing that people are immune once they get the virus. Some of the early tests can show false positives or false negatives, depending on whether or not you've got the antibodies in your system. So some of the early tests that suggested that we might not be immune, I think a lot of people are discounting those. Later tests have shown that people are in fact immune. And in a lot of cases, people are actually using the blood of convalescent patients, that is people who have recovered, to treat patients who are suffering from the coronavirus now. How long that immunity lasts, that's a question that we won't know for a while. In some cases, vaccines or immunities from things like the measles last for the rest of your life. In other cases, in things like the flu, they only last for a little while. Your body might forget what one particular flu strain looks like, and then a new flu strain comes along. That's why we have to get our flu shots every year. So those are questions that are yet unanswered. One really hopeful part about this whole outbreak is we're learning about the coronavirus at an absolutely unprecedented rate. The scary part of that, though, is we're also learning how much we still have yet to learn.
Yeah, still have quite a bit to learn.
Indeed. Reed, your book is out May 12th in paperback. People should go pick it up. Thank you so much. Always great to have your analysis.
Thank you, Reed.
Good to see you guys.